Okay, so now we're going to learn about rationalizing surds in the denominator. Before we do that, we need to understand what is surds. Alright, so surds is any irrational number that is expressed with a square root. Okay, so for us to, we're gonna do rationalizing our denominator. What does it mean to rationalize? We want to get rid of any surds in the denominator. Not numerator, but denominator. Okay, in its simplified form. So there's two scenarios where we have to rationalize denominator. The first scenario would be when there is one surd in the denominator. And the second scenario would be when there is two terms and one of them contains a surd. Alright. So let's look at the first scenario. Okay, so again we want to get rid of the surd in the denominator without changing the actual value of this. So without changing it, we only can multiply by 1. And in this case, in order to get rid of the square root, we will multiply by square root 2 as well, because square root 2 times square root 2 will give you 2. So 1 times square root 2 is square root 2. Square root 2 times square root 2 will just be 2. That's your final answer. To double check, there should be no surd in the denominator. It doesn't matter if there's a surd in the numerator. Okay, for the second scenario, before we attempt to do this, we need to understand the concept of conjugate. Okay, so conjugate comes from difference of two squares. So difference of two squares formula is as such. Alright, what does conjugate mean? Conjugate means, this is an example of conjugate. A conjugate of A plus B is, we use the same values A and B, but instead of plus, we put minus, the opposite. So another example of conjugate of A minus B would be, again, using the same values A and B, but instead of minus, we have a plus. Now what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is when we multiply by the conjugate, we can use the property of difference of two squares. Okay, so that's what we're going to do in this scenario here. So to get rid of this, without changing the actual value, multiply by 1, we multiply by the conjugate. Again, it's the same value 5 and square root 2, but instead of plus, we put minus. One times this numerator would be 5 minus square root 2. We multiply the denominators together. This, as you can tell, is A plus B, A minus B. So essentially, it is the difference of two squares. The square of a square root 2 is just 2. This is my final answer. In order to check whether I've rationalized the denominator is to see whether there's any surds in the denominator. It doesn't matter if there's a surd in the numerator. And that's it.